Welcome, welcome. I'm super excited. We are here creating $1 million year. This is what we're talking about, real women, and real conversations. And hosted by me, Becky LaFave, where I help empower you to grow your personal brand, your influence, and your business. So in the next couple of weeks on Mondays, we have this brand new series coming out where I'm talking to other women entrepreneurs in the online space, creating and building and have their own business. And they're going to be sharing with you exactly what they've been able to do and what they're all about. So today we are talking about reprogramming your inner critic into a positive voice, a positive one. So if you're joining us live, make sure to jump in the chat, say hello to us. And if you're catching us on the replay, also do the same, drop in replay. But without further desire here, my guest is Marian. She is a passionate and, she is a woman that I read her bio and it's pretty lengthy. I had to shorten it down. I got to be honest with you. But she's an incredible woman that is on a mission, and she is full of life and joy and wants to help other women achieve their business and their career personally, their life goals, because she's going to share with you exactly her story. So I don't want to rob her of that, but her desires are really to help you achieve your dreams, right? And she's teaching you these personal experiences that she's had. She's got a lot of certificates behind her name. I'll let her share with you exactly that. But we're going to be talking about tapping in those limiting beliefs that are really holding you back in life, let alone your business. Okay, so we're going to talk about both. But without further ado, let me introduce you as I spit out my words here. Hello and welcome.
Hi, thank you. It's great to be here.
You're welcome. So tell us, where are you coming in from?
Cape Town, South Africa. Very far away from you.
Yeah, South Africa. Welcome, welcome. See how cool this is, when ladies around the world. We are literally reaching women around the world. This is so powerful. And this is why I encourage every woman out there to, one, share this broadcast, because we're in the month of February, which is all about love. And we are all about supporting women in business that want a different life, that want to open up their mindset and really start believing in themselves. And that's what we're going to share about today. So, your story really touched me. Because it's been many, many years, but I can say for my own self, and just being in business for 32 years, I've also witnessed this. And, I had a closed mindset for many, many years. And I didn't even understand what that even meant until I realized what an open mindset, a growth mindset, I should say, looks like. And I remember this quote very clearly. If you think you can't, you're right. And if you also think you can, you're also right. Which one do you choose, right? And from that moment forward, it just was like, that's the mindset, right? And then how do you get in? And we're going to dig deeper today with what you share, but reprogramming that, because that's where the inner work is. And that's where you come in. Yeah. So please share us your story, and really, why did you decide to do this? Because you've got a big background behind you.
Yes. So I'm going to share just the parts that are most relevant to tonight's talk. And that was that I grew up in a large family. I had two older sisters who were 5 and 7 years older than me. And as a young child, I desperately wanted to be one of the girls. But the age gap was such that I couldn't participate in their activities. But I constantly was told I was too small. You can't do that. You can't do this. You can't join us. And the next sibling was a boy, 2 years below me. And in a female-dominated household, he was determined to be a boy. And so he often told me that I wasn't good at stuff because I was a girl.
Mm.
And then when I reached puberty, my parents started saying to me, oh, you can't do that because you're a girl. And I think I was probably in my 30s. One day I was reading working on myself, reading a book on self-development. And I suddenly got this, my head was full of a whole lot of different voices all at the same time saying, you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't, you can't. And that's when I started to realize that in those formative years, I had a whole lot of voices telling me what I couldn't do and nobody telling me what I could do. And that has limited my life enormously.
Yeah, I just hearing your story, and I'm sure women jump in the chat, please, if you can relate to this in some form of way, because I find that everything does start from birth until 7 is what I've heard, that all the things, just like you were since you were a little girl, all those things are embedded deep in with us. And, there's so many things that we don't even realize until you wake up to that, right? A lot of women don't even realize that autopilot that's happening, that inner voice, like you talk about, that inner voice that's going on all the time. Like, I can totally relate to the inner voice. Ladies, drop a 1 in the chat if you can relate to this inner voice inside and start to recognize it. It's like starting to wake up as we have this conversation. Make sure you share below. Okay, go ahead. Sorry. I just have to get that out there because this is this is going to serve so many people. Welcome, ladies. I'm so happy that you're here jumping in the chat.
Yeah, so I had a very negative inner voice, always telling me what I hadn't done well enough, and somehow even when I did things well, it was never good enough. There was always, it was okay. It was never. I could never actually praise myself.
So many women in the business industry do not know how to celebrate themselves. I'm so glad you said that, because as women, we're taught not to, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and it was exacerbated because we were a 4-generation family. And my grandmother had this thing about boasting. Anything you said positive about yourself was considered boasting, and that was a cardinal sin. So self-promotion in my business was a huge issue for me when I started out, and still it just sneaks in different ways about doing things and thinking, oops, I'm not sure about that. And then it goes back to that thing of it's self-promotion, it's being visible, it's telling people about myself and my life. And I'm thinking, so that's has been something I've had to overcome.
Yeah, it's like we've never given ourselves permission. And why do we wait for somebody else to give us permission? Why can't we give ourselves permission? Is it still because we're locked up from that inner voice from a child?
Yes. And I think in subtle ways, the old socializing of women still actually exists. Okay. We, on the surface, we have very different lives. Even when I was a child, I had many more options than my mother had. But I was still in a. When I came to career choice, there were still limitations on what a woman could do, or what was considered appropriate for a woman to do.
Yes.
And I think today, even though a lot of those restrictions have fallen away at a subtle level, women are still told that we're second-class citizens.
Yes, I would agree with that. Definitely. So it's amazing. And tell us, how long have you been doing this work? Because I think you said, was it 20 years that you've been doing this work now?
Yes. Yeah, that's about that.
20 20 years is a long time. And so let me dig into, because I've got some questions. I'm sure, ladies, if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Like if you're curious about something, she might be able to support you right here online. Andrea, thank you for showing up. Linda, welcome. So, okay. So do you remember a time, we kind of went through this, do you remember a time where your inner critic really held you back the most? Like, what would be one thing that you would say that most women right now in life, in business, that possibly happened to you is what's holding them back?
Oh, that thing about self-promotion, not
Mm.
being able to stand up and say, I can do this, or I can do this well.
Mm.
I know when I still had a corporate job, I had a job evaluation, which not evaluating me in the job, which I didn't fully understand until we were too far into the process for me to change. But it was about evaluating what salary band my job should fall into. And
Mm.
because I didn't understand that, and I had this ingrained thing about underplaying my skills, I didn't play myself up and I stayed in a lower salary band.
Yes. Oh, so many women. Yes. Gail right here. Welcome, Gail. She's saying, I agree. You know, so many times we get overseen in a lot of different things because of still the old thinking, right? And our own self old thinking, you know, I can't ask for the raise or whatever it is. I can't charge that much for my program.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so many things that, and that's that inner critic that you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Coming right back at us. So
Mm-hmm.
now, how do you typically respond to negative self-talk? Because this is obviously negative self-talk that we're having with ourselves, our can'ts, you know, all the things that we really want in our life and business. So how do you speak to that?
I had a breakthrough at a workshop that I did with somebody who insisted that the feedback we give each other be worded in, we had to, you know, we could say positive, give positive feedback, but any negative feedback, we had to word it in, would you like to, how would you like to do that differently?
Mm.
Yeah. And then you had to give them a reason why, you know, or would you consider doing, it was actually a public presentation thing, and I think it was so that, for instance, would you consider speaking more loudly or more slowly because I couldn't hear you clearly?
Mm.
And soon after the end of that workshop, I gave a talk at a group meeting, and the time management wasn't very good. So I had been given an hour and ended up with half an hour. And that threw me out quite a lot. And I got in my car at the end of it. And my first thought was, how would I do that differently next time? And that was such an incredibly significant moment for me, because I was, as I closed the door, I was kind of dreading the influx of negative criticism that would normally have happened.
Oh,
I was very grateful to that trainer for having in 3 days instilled that change of mind in me. So I would first
hear all these women on here right now going, would you get in the car and be like, oh my God, I only had 30 minutes and I needed an hour and da, 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 da. And that, how bad was it? Was I really, like, you beat yourself up and you don't even know, like, was it good? Like, you didn't even have the metrics yet to see if people were like, yes, this was amazing. And you're already beating yourself up. Instead, you said, how could I have done things differently? Which is a definitely an inner voice change right away, right?
Oh, yes.
You went to the positive and not the negative. How could I have done something differently in that moment? And to really keep you on your toes. Like, that's what being an entrepreneur is, right? Keeping you on your toes. How can I shift? How can I move fast? How can I stand up for myself? How can I speak my value? Yeah.
I would seriously advise everybody to put that sentence into their inner voice. It makes a huge, huge difference to use that sentence, because you're acknowledging that there's room for improvement.
Yeah. That growth mindset, right?
Yeah. but without putting yourself down and then you spend days trying to recover from that onslaught of criticism.
Yeah. Yeah.
And instead you can just say, well, next time I will have two versions of the talk in my head, a short one and a long one.
Right. I love that. Exactly. You know, when I first started really listening to my inner voice, and God knows, you know, women, we're not saying we're perfect on here. We're far from it. We're constantly working on it. Right. Marianne, we're constantly working on it. But I noticed in the very beginning when I was working on it, I had a coach at one point tell me, keep a wristband, even a rubber band, something that would snap. And every time you caught yourself having a negative thought, you would snap it. Now, every time you had a negative thought, you could throw $1 in the jar or whatever. And just to see like how it adds up, because if you, it's not, we don't want to give you a chore, but just recognize, right? Like that was recognize. I would snap that rubber band on my wrist and recognize like, oh my gosh, how many times did I have to snap that? And over time, I recognized that I wasn't snapping as much because I was snapping out of it faster, right? So it's
Another way of doing that is it's one that I came across that helped me was every time I heard myself say something negative about myself, I would reframe it as a positive statement. And I used to tell myself, you don't have to believe it. It's a grammar exercise.
Oh, love that.
And so, and it took me about 3 months before I noticed that I had actually stopped criticizing myself. And in the process, I also learned to say good things to myself, because although I kept saying to myself, you don't have to believe, because it was very hard in the beginning to actually say something about myself. Oh, and the other thing I did was every time I looked in the mirror, I also had to say something nice to myself.
Yeah, because our eyes are our souls, right? So your eyes are the soul to you. Just like when you're with somebody else, eye to eye is you're feeling their soul. They're connecting to your soul. So I find that the hardest. I did an exercise one time speaking life into myself in the mirror, and she said, you need to look in your eyes, right? You need to hear you and feel you. And she gave me a task for 28 days to create that new habit of what I wanted to change in my life. And it was tough in the beginning, you know, like anything that you need to move forward in, it takes time. And changing that inner voice, like you said, giving yourself that time, put in the work if you really want change in your life, right? I love that.
Yeah, the mirror work that I did wasn't as deep as that, but it was just saying, hello, I like you, or hello, you look nice today, or, you know, it was just anything that was a positive statement.
Yeah.
And that was right at the beginning, before I'd even got involved with all of this. So I really didn't know, I didn't really understand what I was doing. But I was going through a tough patch after a breakup of a relationship that I was very deeply committed to. And I knew that I needed to change something. And I came across this exercise in a book and thought, oh, well, I can do that.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because when we talk about this, you know, when you think about it, 20 years ago, it was almost like taboo, right? It was almost like, what are you doing? Today, it's like, oh, yeah, I speak affirmations. Oh, yeah, I am great. I am. But back when you started, there wasn't a lot of this.
I had never heard the word affirmation.
Right. So, I mean, we're going farther back when you first started. So, yeah, it would look totally different today. That would look like if you was to start your journey today. So that's the beautiful thing is you've got all these years of experience to really deep down and help somebody going through it. So, and next question is, in your opinion, what are some of the biggest benefits of having more supported voice going on the daily?
For me, it's about courage, confidence, and trusting yourself. Because so often we don't trust ourselves as part of that negative feedback that we give ourselves, and we take in other people's negative feedback, and we stop trusting ourselves. We lose confidence and we lose courage.
Yeah.
And if you are going to succeed at anything, you need confidence and courage.
Yeah.
And I see them as two sides of the same coin. Or in another image I like to use is non-identical twins, because then courage and confidence are not the same, but they support each other. Sometimes you need courage in order to take action that will build confidence. Sometimes you need confidence to take the courageous action.
Yes, that was beautifully said. Ladies, would you agree? Sometimes we need to have the courage to take that scary action. Like, I teach a lot about go live, make sure that you're showing up on social media to build your business, but you don't have the courage. You think, oh, well, I don't have the confidence. No, sometimes you don't have the courage to just push play and then build your confidence as you go. Right, Miriam? Mm-hmm. That's how you can do it. So mm-hmm. I remember there's so many times in my own life, and ladies, are you like, can you see the same thing in yourself? It's like, oh, I'm pretty confident. I feel pretty confident, but sometimes you don't have the courage to like go, oh God, then the inner critic girl comes to mind. And I'm glad I'm so happy that you shared it in the twin situation, because if you take that out of the equation, like, okay, I don't know, I'm such a visual girl that I could see that vision on that and think, okay, let's just be courage today. Let me just use my courage today, and my confidence is going to show up because I know what I know, right? Ladies, sometimes we know what we know, but we don't have the courage to step out. We don't have the courage to say, I know what I know, right? Because like Marian said, we have this inner critic that will, slow us back and bust our confidence. So,
but sometimes you can also use confidence to build courage. Because, and an example of that, I was in my 20s. I had learned to drive just a couple of years before. So, and I'd been a student. I didn't have my own car. So I didn't actually have a lot of driving experience. It was only when I was at home and on vacation that I could occasionally borrow my mother's car. And I went traveling. And I ended up working in a country pub in the UK. And there was a beat up old minivan, mini panel van that there was the chef used to get supplies for the restaurant. But when he wasn't using it, it was available to staff. And one day I borrowed this car to go into the nearest city. And they had lots of one-way streets and roundabouts and traffic circles, whatever. And I had learned to drive in the Christmas rush of a large, small town. And I drove through, was actually Oxford in England, drove through Oxford, all these one-way streets, not knowing where I was going. In this traffic that was absolutely terrifying for me. And I just kept saying, I learned to drive in the Christmas rush. I can do this. I can learn to drive in the Christmas rush. I can do this.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
And that's where I used confidence to build courage.
Yes, that is so true. Because, here's the beautiful thing about sharing stories, ladies. You can probably connect because, boom, as soon as she said this little piece, sorry, I have my dog in here, Stella. So I remember when I had just learning how to drive, and my parents had always believed that you should drive a stick shift, because if you can drive a stick, then you can drive any car, right? So, my first car was a stick, and we had this little teeny hill going into town. And there was one way to get around that hill. And so I didn't have to worry about if I got to the stop sign at the top, and you're got a stick. If anybody has driven a stick before, drop a 2 below if you drove a stick. And you're on this little hill, and that little weaver room of taking off after the light, it was like, what if I stop? Like all these worries come up, right? And we do this in our life and in business. All these worries come up. Well, what if I stop? okay, well, if you stall, you start the car back up and you're learning. No, I was like, I will go around. I will do everything, right? And then one day I said, I'm going to conquer this. I'm going to use my confidence and I'm just going to do it. And guess what? It worked out just fine. Now, did I stall before? Yes. But I started it back up and started going. So I love that you share that, because I'm sure there's a lot of other women that feel the same way. They can put themselves in your shoes. And this is why it's so important, ladies, for you to understand. Sharing stories connect you to others, right? Sharing stories connect you to others, and that alone will build confidence and courage. So I love that you shared that story. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on. So how do you believe one can begin the process of transforming the inner critic to a more positive voice? And can you share a specific, because how many ladies right now, drop a 3 below, would really like a specific technique or exercise that would help them today? How many would love that? Drop a 3 below and let us know if that would be beneficial for you, because there's a lot of things we could talk about, but if we don't have any techniques, like the tools, right? Like give us some goods. So what do you have to share? They're dropping 3s, so they're really wanting to hear this more.
Okay. The first thing is to accept that your inner critic is actually your friend. It's not your enemy.
I love that. Ladies, will you put that down in the comments, please? It is actually your friend, not your enemy. That's fantastic.
So when you stop fighting it or stop ignoring it, then, because when you're fighting it or ignoring it, there's a lot of your energy is going into that. And it's actually draining you.
Yes.
If you stop fighting it and you accept that what it's saying to you, not necessarily as truth, but I always regard it as I used to always say it's a misguided friend. They're trying to help you, but they're not doing it in a very helpful way. And the information that they're using is out of date. It comes from your childhood, or at least from a previous time in your life, because sometimes we do take on stuff later in life as well. So it can be from a previous time in your life, and it's no longer relevant to today, particularly if it's childhood stuff. You're an adult. It's not relevant. Those childhood prohibitions are not relevant.
That's true right there.
Yeah. So, and talk to it. Imagine that your inner voice is a different person, and have a conversation. Ask them, why do you say these things to me? Most of the time, the answer will be that they're trying to help you. They're trying to keep you safe from making mistakes or being hurt. So the intention is always good. And the other day, I suddenly realized that the inner critic is actually playing devil's advocate. And if you don't know what devil's advocate is, it's a person who is actually part of a project. They're in favor of it, or they've come in as a sort of consultant to it. And they're asking questions and saying, what if this goes wrong? What if that doesn't work? What if this hypothesis isn't true? Not because they're trying to break you down or stop the project, but to show up weaknesses that can then be addressed.
Oh, I just had a big moment. Could you say that again? Because I feel like this is the goods right here. Repeat that little piece again for us.
So the devil's advocate sounds like a negative input person. The worst case scenario, the what if this doesn't work stuff. But it's doing it to show up the weaknesses so that they can be rectified. So if we see
that is powerful right there.
So thank your inner critic for what it's saying, but then say to it, if you're really trying to help me, I would prefer it if you do it differently. I would find it more helpful if you did it this way. And you actually tell it how you want it to do. And I had one client who said to me that she was struggling with putting things off. And she said to me, now when the inner critic And then she retrained her inner critic to say, instead of questioning what she was doing, to actually say to her, you've got it. You've got this.
Mm.
And she was a coach wanting to work with youngsters, and she was wanting to approach some schools. And she said to me, I phoned 4 schools, because she now, instead of having a negative inner critic, she had this inner voice when she planned it saying, you've got this, you can do it.
I love that. So you would reframe your thoughts in an instant by saying something like what you said earlier. I understand that you're trying to save me. You're trying to keep me safe, but it's not necessary, right? It's not necessary because this is my truth and this is what I want.
Or they can, maybe it is helpful, but they can do it. It's more helpful to support you. Now, take a visibility thing. When you were a child, maybe being invisible, not attracting attention, did keep you safe in some way. But as an adult and setting up your own business, you've got to be visible. Yeah. So you say you need to update your inner critic and say, look, that was fine when I was 5. But now, in order to be safe, in order to build my business, have the income that will keep me financially safe, I have to be visible. So now I need you to encourage me rather than protect me by stopping me from doing that public speaking presentation work.
I love that. That is so great. Such great advice today with reprogramming your inner critic. Ladies, drop below and thank Marion for being here and sharing this information, because one little thing today, that if you took one thing away today, could really change that inner voice that helped you and encouraged you to show up bigger in your life, show up bigger in your business, right? And encourage you and gave you the confidence that you need to say yes. Say yes to yourself. Say yes to other things in your life, and to be able to sometimes say no to things that don't, correlate with what you really want in life. Because I know a lot of times we say yes to things that, is not in alignment with us anymore. It might have been, like she said, it might have been 5 years ago, might have been 10 years ago, but for some reason we keep on saying yes to these things. It's okay to say no to some things, right? So thank you so much. We appreciate your time and sharing from around the world in Africa. And this is the beautiful thing about the online space. So thank you so much. Ladies, hang tight, and we'll see you later, okay? Thanks so much, Mary.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, ladies, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a Monday not to forget. We did a video earlier speaking with someone else, Kim. So if you missed that, please go back and check that out. But I also want to let you know, if you are growing a business and you're like, I'm having trouble attracting new clients, new customers, I have a special gift just for you. If you put leads below, I'll make sure that you get the special gift. And if not, thank you so much for joining. And this is the month of love. It is February. We are in the month of love. So if you thought this was powerful, if you thought somebody else out there on the online space could utilize this information, hit that share button. And when you do, let me just remind you, when you do, you will be put in to getting a gift card. You get into getting a chance at winning a gift card just for saying thank you, just for saying thank you for sharing and caring. So how powerful is that, to be able to receive something just because you cared enough to share? And thank you so much once again for joining us. Until next time, take care of yourself and your business, and we'll see you real soon. Bye for now.